The person most stuck in your life right now probably meditates every morning, journals every night, and can explain the law of attraction in their sleep. That's the paradox nobody in the manifestation space talks about. The more spiritual work you do, the easier it is to build an invisible wall between you and the thing you want. And the wall feels like progress, which is exactly why you never think to look for it. There's a specific pattern that shows up in people who consume a lot of spiritual content. They learn the vocabulary, they adopt the practices, they start seeing themselves as someone who gets it. And right there, in that moment of feeling like you've risen above the average person's consciousness, something clicks into place. A subtle identity forms. You become the enlightened one, the one who's done the inner work, the one who vibrates higher. That identity feels like growth. It mimics growth almost perfectly, but it operates on the same mechanism as every other ego structure you've ever built. It needs to be maintained. It needs to be defended. It needs other people to be less aware, so that your awareness means something. And the energy required to maintain that identity is the exact energy that should be flowing to what you're trying to create. Think about how this plays out in practice. Someone tells you about a problem they're having. Instead of just listening, you feel a pull to offer the spiritual perspective, to reframe their suffering, to gently suggest they're creating their own reality. That pull, that urge to be the wise one in the room, is the ego wearing a meditation shawl. And every time you give in to it, you're reinforcing a version of yourself that needs to be above others to feel whole. That neediness has a frequency. It's the frequency of lack, dressed up in the language of abundance. The tricky part is that spiritual ego doesn't look like traditional ego. Traditional ego is loud. It brags about money, status, achievements. You can spot it across a room. Spiritual ego whispers. It says things like, "I'm just further along in my journey," or "they'll understand when they're ready." It positions itself as humble while performing a constant, quiet act of separation. And separation is the opposite of the state that allows things to flow toward you. So why does this happen to people who are genuinely trying to grow? Because the ego is adaptive. It's been running your identity since childhood, and it will use whatever material you give it. Give it sports, and it becomes the athlete. Give it academics, and it becomes the smart one. Give it spirituality, and it becomes the awakened one. The costume changes, the operating system stays identical. Here's where this gets personal. If you've been doing manifestation work for months or years, and the results feel thin, ask yourself one question. When you sit down to visualize or affirm, or script, who is sitting down? Is it someone who genuinely feels the wish fulfilled? Or is it someone who feels good about being the kind of person who does this work? Those two states look similar from the outside. From the inside, they're separated by a canyon. One is surrender, the other is performance. The performance version has a tell. It loves the process more than the outcome. It collects techniques, reads every book, tries every method, talks about alignment and resistance and letting go, while gripping the identity of spiritual person with white knuckles. The process becomes the point because the process feeds the ego. The outcome would actually threaten it. Because if you got the thing, the money, the relationship, the freedom, you'd have to find a new reason to feel special. You'd just be a person with a good life. The spiritual seeker identity would dissolve. And this is what nobody warns you about. Part of you doesn't want the manifestation to land. Part of you is invested in the seeking itself. The seeking gives you a role, a community, a daily structure, a sense of meaning. Getting the thing would end the game. So the ego quietly sabotages, and it does it by making you feel more spiritual, more aligned, more trusting of divine timing, while divine timing conveniently stretches into months and years of waiting. There's a researcher named Chögyam Trungpa who named this decades ago. He called it spiritual materialism. The idea that you can consume spiritual experiences the same way you consume material goods, stacking them up, using them to build a shinier self-image. A weekend retreat becomes a status symbol. A meditation streak becomes a trophy. The inner work gets colonized by the same competitive, acquisitive energy it was supposed to dissolve. So what breaks the pattern? Discomfort, specifically the discomfort of being ordinary. The spiritual ego cannot survive contact with genuine ordinariness. When you stop needing your practice to make you special, the practice starts working differently. When you meditate without tracking the streak, something shifts. When you affirm without the subtle satisfaction of being someone who affirms, the words land deeper. Watch what happens when someone challenges your spiritual beliefs. If there's a flare of defensiveness, even a polite, composed, "I respect your perspective, but," that's the ego. A genuine state of knowing doesn't need to defend itself. It doesn't flinch when questioned. It doesn't need to educate. The need to correct someone's understanding of consciousness is the same energy as the need to correct someone who mispronounced your job title. Same mechanism, different vocabulary. One of the most honest tests you can run on yourself takes about 30 seconds. Sit with this scenario. You never manifest the specific thing you've been working toward. The relationship, the money, the body, the career shift, none of it comes. And simultaneously, you're told that all the spiritual growth you've done is real. You've genuinely evolved as a person. You're more present, more compassionate, more aware. Would that be enough? If something in you recoils at that scenario, if the growth without the prize feels hollow, that's important data. That recoil is the ego revealing its actual priority. The growth was always a means to an end, a transaction disguised as transformation. The way out runs through a strange door. You have to want the thing and release the identity of being someone who's working on getting the thing. Those can't coexist in the same frequency. One is open, receptive, already whole. The other is performing openness while secretly keeping score. The body knows the difference even when the mind doesn't. You felt it, that tight, effortful energy during a visualization session where you're trying to feel abundant, but something underneath feels like reaching. That reaching is the ego's fingerprint. People who actually manifest consistently share a quality that's hard to fake. They're a little boring about it. They don't post about their morning routine. They don't correct people's limiting beliefs at dinner parties. They don't have a spiritual vocabulary that's 3 times the size of their actual experience. They just live in a state that assumes things work out, and when things don't work out, they adjust without a crisis of faith. There's no identity at stake. There's no "but I did everything right," because they were never keeping score. The shift often happens in a moment that feels like loss. You realize that your spiritual identity has been a shield, keeping you safe from the vulnerability of actually receiving what you want. Because receiving means the gain ends. Receiving means you can't be the seeker anymore. You have to be the person who has the thing, and that person doesn't get to feel special for wanting it. That person just has to live. And living, ordinary, unspiritual, unremarkable living, turns out to be the vibration that was missing the entire time, the frequency of someone who eats breakfast without it being a mindful practice. Who drives to work without transmuting the traffic into a spiritual lesson? Who wants things plainly, simply, without wrapping the want in 3 layers of metaphysical justification? Your manifestation practice might be working perfectly. The technique might be flawless. The only question worth sitting with is whether you've built a self-concept around being the person who does the technique. Because that self-concept is the block, and it will keep shape-shifting for as long as you let it wear the disguise. The ego you thought you dissolved during your last breathwork session is the one reading this right now, already planning how to use this insight to become even more spiritually aware. It just absorbed the lesson about spiritual ego and turned it into more spiritual ego. See how fast it moves? The only response that scares it is a shrug. A quiet, boring, utterly unspiritual shrug, and then going about your day as if you have nothing to prove to the universe. Because you don't.